Hi, welcome to Chapter 5, where we're going to be discussing personality and values. So, after studying this chapter, reading the chapter, listening to my lecture, you should be able to understand and describe personality as the way it's measured and factors that can shape it. You should be fluent in your understanding and application of the MBTI personality framework, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and the Big Five model. You should be able to identify the three traits of the Dark Triad. You should be able to discuss the core self-evaluation, which includes self-monitoring. Describe the situations or situation effect, whether personalities predict behavior. Contrast terminal and instrumental values. And describe the difference between person to job fit and person to organization fit. And identify Hofstede's 5 value dimensions of national culture. Okay, so first, let's talk personality. We all have one. Some personalities are bubbly, some personalities are cranky. So you could describe your personality in different measurable terms. Some people aggressive, submissive, lazy, adventurous, loyal, timid, but it's basically the sum of the ways the individual reacts or is perceived to react from others. So personality is often defined as characteristics such as outgoing and charming. However, psychologists define personality as the growth and development of a person's whole psychological system. So we study personality and organizational behavior because it impacts a number of important work outcomes. And we can attempt to measure personality through a variety of methods. Often these methods are utilized in the hiring process to assist in hiring the right person for the job and organization. So not everybody's personality will fit with every organization, and not everybody's personality will fit with a particular department or group of colleagues you may be working with. So personality is a really strong fit. So this comes into play a lot on the interview. So on the interview, most people don't display their full personality, so it's up to the interviewer to draw it out of you. I know that when I interviewed people, besides the standard interview questions, I would throw some personality curveballs in there to get an idea of what their personality might be like. So I would ask them questions like, what was the last book you read? Or what are your favorite top 5 books? What's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite top 5 movies? And try to get an idea, get them to open up. Maybe they hit on a movie that you're familiar with, you can talk about it a little bit. I might ask them what hobbies they may have, and if I ever got a person who would answer like this, well, I don't watch TV or I don't really have any hobbies, then you know what? I'm not really hiring. Thank you. Because you're obviously too guarded, you're not really displaying your personality interview. I can't really tell if you're a good fit for the job. So one of the things I do look for in interviews is a sense of your personality. So keep that in mind. Now, measuring personality. So there are self-report surveys, which are the most common and pretty much prone to error, and they evaluate in a series of factors. So self-reports are they're the most common and easiest way to measure personality, but they're prone to error due to the fact that the individual is reporting all the data about themselves. And a lot of times we have a perception of our personality that we want to project that isn't quite really our personality. So you could see this if you say you have close friends or family, you know what their personality is, and then you come and encounter to someone new, and then you see them change. So they're adjusting their personality, seeming to have a better personality or a more appealing personality in the beginning, but then slowly they revert back to their true personalities, and then you're saying to yourself, what have I done? Okay, so let's look at personality determinants. So there are many determinants of personality, including heredity, environmental factors, and age. There has been a long-standing debate about whether genetics or environments are more important in determining personality, but they both play an important part. The heredity approach refers to factors determined at conception, such as physical stature, gender, things of that nature. This has been reaffirmed by studies that have looked at twins who were raised apart but still had similar personalities, and many studies have been able to duplicate this effect. However, there are differences observed leading to the idea that environmental factors can have some influence. Age does influence the level of ability that an individual has, even though it's widely held that the basic personality stays consistent throughout the life of an individual. So if you think about this, you've known people for long periods of time, maybe they're siblings or parents, and you probably noticed that their personality may have changed a little, but it's mostly intact throughout time. So people's personalities, although they can shift and change somewhat, it's generally difficult for someone's personality to completely change. And if someone does display radically different personality traits, then sometimes there's a mental problem, where they may have a schizophrenia, or they may have bipolar, or something really unbalancing of their chemicals in their brain. And one of the side effects is a drastically different personality, where you say, this isn't the person I know. And the reason we could tell that so easily is because most people's personalities ring true throughout the ages. And their personalities, they may be able to self-monitor and self-change the perception of their personalities in different roles, such as, a family member, a friend, work member. But by and large, our environment and our genetics are going to make up a good portion of, our personality. So although as an individual, we can gain control somewhat of our personality and try to break our personality habits or improve upon our personality habits through our sheer will, and form habits of better ways to display our personality, which is certainly true and something that we all should be working on. If there's elements, take a minute to think about, is there any part of your personality you don't like? Okay, take a minute. Okay, and we're back. So hopefully, I wasn't quite a minute, but hopefully you could think of something that you're not that crazy about, and now think of ways to improve that. So you may not be able to eliminate that aspect completely from your personality, but what are some ways that you could soften it a bit? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so the MBIT indicator, or MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. So this is a way of putting together a personality framework. So the MBTI is the most widely used personality instrument in the world. Participants are classified within 4 scales to determine one of 16 possible personality types. These types are broken down into 4 dichotomies. The first is extroverts, who tend to be more social, assertive, versus introverts, who tend to be more quiet and shy. And I think all of us can really put ourselves in the extrovert or introvert field. The second dichotomy is sensing and intuitive. Sensors are more practical and orderly, where intuits utilize consciousness and processes, sort of think of more like intuition. The third dichotomy is thinking and feeling. Thinking focuses upon using reason and logic, whereas feeling utilizes values and emotions. The final dichotomy is judging and perceiving. Judges want order and structure, whereas perceivers are more flexible and spontaneous. Okay, so these classifications can be combined into 16 different personality types, where we can kind of mix and match some of these elements. Now, I'm pretty sure that you could find this test online. If you type in, let me see if I can find it. Here's the website, Myers-Briggs.org. And then on this website, it'll give you the basics of this personality inventory test, and give you, here's the 16 types, and you can kind of scroll through them. Now, they kind of they use these dimensions to combine the 4 of the dimensions to put you in a category where they're sort of ranking you on these 4 dimensions in order. So, extrovert, feeling, thinking. Okay, so that's interesting. And I think, take the instrument. If you not know, you may wish to take the instrument. Okay, so click on that. If you'd like to take it now. Okay, so there is, so you could follow links, and there's a way to take the assessment. Hopefully, it costs though, so we don't want to pay for this. Yeah, of course it's going to cost. There should be somewhere where you could take this for free online if you search around for it, if you're really interested in it. Some of you may have done this already. I did this a couple times. I forget what I was, but it was interesting. So this is the official website, which I'm sure they want you to pay to take the exam, but I'm going to see if I can find somewhere where it's free. Yeah, search around the internet. I found there's this www.truly.com. It looks like they'll let you take the tests based on the Briggs-Myers. So there's a couple of different places that you could go if you're interested in taking this type of personality test. It's interesting. It might be worth it. Okay. Now, measuring personality types, the Big Five model, so the 5 traits. So the Big Five model of personality sets forth that there are 5 basic dimensions that underline all others and encompass most of the significant variations in human personality. So the Big Five are extrovertism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and openness to experiences. So there is a lot of research that supports the Big Five model, and it has been shown to predict behavior at work. So this is a strongly supported model of behavior, the personality that could result in behavior. And these are basically the 5 traits that we all have varying degrees of how we express these traits in our personality. So some of us are more extrovert on one side of the scale, more introvert on the other side of the scale. Some of us are more agreeable by nature, some of us are more argumentative. So you get the picture. For each of these have a scale from one side to the other, and you kind of see where you fit within the scale of these 5 traits. So let's look at the Big Five traits a little closer. Emotional stability. So why is it relevant? Well, we want an employee that is more emotionally stable, of course. And we want someone who is less negative, is thinking and less negative emotions, less hyper vigilant, and because this affects your job and life satisfaction. It can lower your stress levels. So we want someone who's emotionally stable, who can deal and process their emotions efficiently. Extrovertism. If someone's more of an extrovert than an introvert, they have better interpersonal skills, greater social dominance, more emotionally expressive, and this could lead to higher performance, especially for leaders, and can lead to higher job and life satisfaction. Not to say that introverts can't find their place in the world, but if you're an introvert, you may not want to be on the center stage in the front, or the leader, or running a company. You may be better behind the scenes and analyzing data, drawing conclusions, writing. There are a lot of excellent jobs for more introverted people. Openness, increased learning, more creative, more flexible and autonomous, and that's good for someone you could train, someone who could be an understanding and flexible leader, more adaptable. So people who have this is really critical for business. People have more of an open mind is someone who you want to hire. People who have closed mind frames that don't want to really don't want to challenge themselves and their belief system in any way, it's going to be a really difficult person to get along with at work, to train, and to adapt and be creative. So we always want more open-mindedness traits. Agreeability. So people who are more agreeable are better liked. They complement more, they're a little bit more conforming. So this definitely leads to higher performance and lower levels of deviant behavior. Now, you don't want to be so agreeable that it's annoying, but there's a limit of how agreeable you can be. But there's generally, there are these people that when you're talking to somebody and you're saying stuff, they generally agree with you unless there's a real big something that's really bothering them. And then there's the people you talk to, and every little thing you say, they're correcting you or not agreeing with you, or forcing down other opinions down your throat every 10 seconds. And that just gets really annoying. So you want, hopefully, something a little bit more balanced, leaning a little bit more to the agreeable side. Conscientiousness, greater effort and persistence, more drive and discipline, better organized and planning is what's relevant in this, and that's definitely going to enhance performance, enhance leadership, and greater longevity in the company. So we want people that care about their work, care about themselves, and care about others. So these are the Big Five traits and how it relates to organizational behavior. Now there's a Dark Triad. So Machiavellianism, this is based on, this is a historical person that had these traits, and we call them Macs. And so researchers have found that these three socially undesirable traits called the Dark Triad, which makes up Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, are irrelevant to organizational behavior. So Machiavellianism describes a person who tends to be emotionally distant and believes that the ends justify the means. So they could justify their actions even though they may be unethical and inappropriate and uncivilized, as long as it justifies the means. So sort of like winning by any means. They tend to be more competitive and have a real strong need to win, even when winning may hurt other people or winning may not be in their best situation. Because believe it or not, there's a time to lose. For example, you're playing golf with a potential new boss of a new company you may work for. Maybe you don't win and completely devastate him on the course. Maybe you let him win. So there are times where and even if you do lose, and maybe it's in some situations you don't want to lose, but if you lose in a way that's more gracious and more sportsmanlike, that's always looked favorable as well. So Machiavellianisms are generally sore losers, and that's always looked at negatively. So they can be very persuasive in situations where there is direct interaction with minimal rules and people are distracted by our emotions. So they could be pretty dangerous people sometimes, pretty sneaky and manipulative people. Now narcissism is a trait which often hinders job effectiveness. It describes a person who requires excessive admiration, has a strong sense of entitlement. A narcissist is really all about themselves, and they just want to talk about themselves, look at themselves, dress themselves, talk about their future, talk about their past. So they have they're kind of arrogant in the way that everything's about them. Whenever you try to talk about something, they'll throw something in about themselves. Oh, I did that. Or, they're the one-upper trying to one-up you, or they're just so concerned about themselves, they really don't notice anything that's going on with you. So these people you don't want to have in your life or in business, because they're very, damaging, and they're very, you feel really horrible when you have a friend or a coworker or a parent or a sibling or a boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife who are narcissistic, because in the end, they only want to focus on themselves. And that's really a one-sided relationship. Psychopathy is someone who's a psychopath refers to a lack of concern for others and a lack of guilt or remorse for what their actions can harm or cause. So in narcissism, if you do bring up to the person that, gee, this is how you've been acting and I'm very hurt and this isn't right, they will feel concerned for the situation, and they will be, have some guilt over it if you bring it up to a narcissist. That doesn't mean that will last long, but if a psychopath, they're not going to care about any reason, any of your feeling. I mean, whatever you say doesn't affect them. There's no guilt or remorse, and these are very dangerous people. So people have this aspect of their personality. These are, maybe you could kind of think of, ever watched House of Cards? Frank from House of Cards would describe these elements of the Dark Triad. Okay, the approach avoidance framework. So there are some unresolved issues with the approach avoidance framework. Is the framework simply a way to categorize positive and negative traits as a question? What traits fit into the framework? So further research is needed in this area, but basically there's approach motivation, our attention to positive stimulants, and there's avoidance motivation, or aversion to negative stimulants. So the framework outlines traits that may help explain how they predict work behavior. So basically, this framework is sort of the stick and the carrot, where different stimuli is going to affect our personality as far as positive and negative. So we have this. You can think of this approach and avoidance motivation representing the degree to which we react to stimulants, whereby approach motivation is, our attention to positive, our attraction to positive stimulus, and our avoidance to motivation is our adverseness to negative stimuli. So this framework, organizes traits and may be helpful in how they predict behavior. But one study at least has showed that, for instance, that the approach avoidance motivation can help explain how core self-evaluations affect job satisfaction. So it addresses multiple motivations and how we act. Competitive pressure tends to invoke both approach motivation, people who work harder, avoidance motivation, people who are distracted and demotivated by fear of losing. So it's really trying to put people into this framework of people running towards positive stimuli and reacting well to positive stimuli, and the people reacting badly to negative stimuli. So it's an interesting framework. Other personality traits that are relevant to organizational behavior. So people with CSE, which is core self-evaluation, perform better because they set more ambitious goals for themselves. They're more committed to their goals and they persist longer in attempting to reach them. So self-monitoring is another personality trait that is linked to job performance. It is the ability to adjust behavior to meet situational factors. High monitors are more likely to become leaders in the workplace. Proactive personalities are people who are able to identify opportunities and take action to capitalize on the opportunity. They also have the ability to perceive or persevere through difficulties to meet their goals. Proactive personalities may be important for working teams or cross-functional task force. So these are three. So as a person, self-evaluation or self-awareness is very important as a person. That you take some time to really think about who you are, be aware of what issues or problems you have, to work on becoming more self-aware. And one way you can do that is, in last chapter we talked about emotions and moods. So whenever you have a certain emotion or mood, you want to sit there and think, sometimes we have these emotions and moods, we're not really sure what's causing them. But if you, become a little bit more self-aware and do some self-evaluation, you'll be able to create a new reality that could be more effective for you, and hopefully more effective in the workplace. Self-monitoring is a way of adjusting behavior based on external or situational factors. So this means that you basically know what your behavior is and what you can get away with and what you can't get away with in different work environments. And of course, the proactive personality is someone who's really an A-type personality who wants to, just keep going. A personality that is able to, see opportunities, seize the opportunities, and keep going even when the going gets rough. All right. Okay, so personality and situations. The effect of personality traits on organizational behavior depends on the situation. So there are two frameworks. There's the situation strength, and then there's the trait, what we call trait activation. So the situation strength theory. So strong situations pressure us to exhibit the right behavior, clearly shows us what that behavior is, and discourages the wrong behavior. So in weak situations, anything goes, and thus we are free to express ourselves, our personalities, and our behaviors. Thus, research suggests that personality traits better predict behavior in weak situations than in strong situations, because in strong situations we're trying to cover up the weaknesses of our personality that we don't want to display. And research shows that in a supportive environment, everyone behaves pro-socially. So in an environment that is not so nice, whether an individual has the personality to behave pro-socially makes a major difference. So this, I think we all kind of understand this, that in an environment where we feel comfortable, our personality really shines through. Then, especially environments that are more supportive environments, we're gonna behave. Our best sides of our personality are gonna come out. But there are some times when the environment isn't so nice, and some people's true aggressive and negative personality traits come out, and they get more combative, more argumentative, more disillusioned, more disgruntled. So it's really about testing, how do you deal under fire, your personality. So the situation strength theory is really just saying that your personality has a lot to do with the situation. And you can look at the strengths, situational strength, in terms of clarity, consistency, constraints, consequences. Now, trait activation theory, or TAT, predicts that some of the situations, events, or interventions activate a trait more than others. So, sort of like, you remember that show, The Incredible Hulk? If you're an older person, if you're a younger person, maybe the new Avengers movies, where if the Hulk gets angry, if Bruce Banner gets angry, although I think in the TV show they call him David Banner. I don't know why they changed that, but his real name is Bruce Banner. When he gets angry, then you can think of the Hulk of his really negative emotions coming out and taking effect. And if you ever known someone like this, I've known quite a few people like this, where they seem such a nice personality, push the wrong buttons, and this monster comes out. And that's not a good situation at work. I think we've all probably been in a situation where someone's exploded like that, and you just sit back and you're like, wow, what just happened? Who is this? Let's look a little more closely at trait activation theory. So detailed orientation is required. So job score high, that's job score high in this: air traffic controller, accountant, legal secretary. Job scoring low would be a masseuse, a model, forester, and job scoring high activation of these traits. Okay, so let's just step back for a second. So job scoring, the traits that are listed here should have a predictor behavior in these jobs. So detailed orientation required. This would be the high and the low. If we look social skills, the high level of traits we want for therapists, concierge, who works at a hotel, a clergy, and then lower social traits would be software engineer, pump operator, broadcast technician. Pump operator, I don't know what that is. Maybe they operate the gas pump. So, but these are saying that you really don't need to have a lot of social skills if you're working in these jobs, but in these jobs you definitely need to have a lot of social skills. So jobs that score high activate these traits. So in the detail, you want conscientiousness, and social skills, you want extrovert. You want to be an extrovert, and you want to be agreeable. So competitive work, high on the list of skills for this area would be coach, financial manager, sales representative. Lower would be postal clerk, nuclear reactor operator. Who has these jobs? Historian, I guess. So we don't want to be competitive in those areas, but we want to be more competitive in these areas. So again, this, extrovert and agreeableness. We want more extrovertedness, maybe less agreeableness here. And that's what the plus and minus stand for. Innovation required. So if you're going to be have an innovative job, advertising, writer, systems analyst, actor, which require more openness and open-mindedness. Less open-mindedness, I guess, if you're an activist, a medical technician, a court reporter, because you just want to follow those rules and you don't really need to. You want an argument, I guess the lawyer could fit in some aspects that are paralegal, maybe, not lawyer. Dealing with angry people. So correctional officer, telemarketer, flight attendant, these are people who encounter angry people. Composer, biologist, statistician, they're I guess saying they don't come in contact with angry people too much, so that these skills here, extrovert, agreeableness, and neutrotacism. I'm not sure what that is. Sorry. I guess that's being neutral, or art of being neutral. Time pressure or deadline. So if you have a job like a broadcast news analyst, editor, or airline pilot, the pressure or the deadlines of the jobs, hopefully you're more conscientious and you can deal with that better. And jobs where time pressure isn't so big, mathematician, fitness trainer, skincare. I don't know. This chart is, it's just some examples of how what would activate certain traits. So it's trying to look at jobs and how they would be active, how certain traits would be activated. So the plus would be more activating the trait, and the negative would be less activating the trait. All right. So values, so what are values? Values represent basic convictions that make judgments about what is the best mode of conduct or end state of existence. So personality are socially preferable to an opposite or converse mode of conduct or end of state existence. So really, values, that's just a kind of fancy way of putting it, but values are more what you hold dear, or what sort of values are always a lot of times attached to beliefs. So you as a person may intuitively have a value system that you're familiar with. Values, they contain a certain judgmental element because they carry individuals' ideas about what's right and wrong, what's good, what's desirable, and they have both, content and intensity attributes to them. The content attribute says a mode of conduct is important, and the intensity attribute specifies how it's important. So each of us try to maintain and hold on to a value system of things that we believe in. So these are sometimes your personality can help shape your values, and of course your environment, the people you know and respect will also shape your values. But values come into play, and understanding a person's values is an important aspect on how they're going to perform at work. So there's a lot of evidence linking personality to values, implying that values may be partially determined by genetic traits as well. So some of your values can be political, liberal, conservative. They may be how you conduct yourself in safety or ethical situations. So I think we're all aware of our basic values, but it's definitely beneficial for you to take some time to step back, think about, write down what are some values you hold dear. What are some values or principles you have that are important to you? That way, it'd be better be able to reinforce and explain these principles and values, especially in a situation where it may become, if you're doing something against your basic values, that's gonna bring up some negative emotions or feelings. And if you don't realize what your values are, you may be feeling a certain way, but not connecting it to your values. And that's why being self-aware helps in dealing with these issues. Now, a value system represents individuals' values and priorities. So you prioritize your values and you base them on how important the particular value is to you as an individual and how intense the feelings are about your particular values. So the way individuals set up their values in order of importance is relatively stable over time and sets a foundation for many work outcomes, such as attitudes, motivation, behavior. In addition, values are important in the workplace because they can influence an individual's perception and cloud their objectivity. So if you were to list your values in a hierarchy of most important to least important, you can kind of get an idea of your foundation. And this is gonna definitely affect how you live your life and how you perform your job. So here's a value survey that we're going to go over. So the Rokeach value system was created by Milton Rokeach. It consists of two sets of values, terminal values and instrumental values. Terminal values describe the desire, values, goals a person would like to keep or achieve in their lifetime. Instrumental values are preferred modes of behavior or means of achieving one's terminal values. So the values vary between groups and can cause trouble when group members hold different values and negotiations are needed. So really it's a look at what do you desire and how are you going to get what you're going to desire? How are you going to behave to get what you're going to desire? So that's just one value system. We have Holland's Hexagon, which is another personality to job fit. So personality and value studies are important to the field of organizational behavior because they have the ability to be linked to workplace outcomes. So the personality job fit theory developed by John Holland has been critical to thinking about how people fit into a specific job. Holland classifies people into 6 personality types utilizing vocational preference inventory. Throughout the study of personality, it becomes clear that there are intrinsic differences in personality between people. Given that there are a number of different jobs, it is logical that people in jobs congruent with their personalities will be more satisfied and successful at work. Now, what the personality is matched with the type of occupation, so when the person is matched with his personality is matched with the proper occupation, then there's a stronger sense of positive work outcomes, job satisfaction, and achievement. So let's look at this hexagon. So here is realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, conventional. So this would be his hexagon. Now, and that it's an interesting relationship among occupation and personality. And if you look this up online, there are some additional tools that will link these characteristics to certain personalities if you wanted to get sort of an idea of where you might fit in or where your personality would be aligned with a particular profession. Okay, so the person organizational fit. This is the idea can be further linked to the workplace by looking at person and organizational fit. So the employee's personality needs to fit within the organizational culture. When employees find organizations that match their values, they are more likely to be selected and correspondingly more satisfied with their work. So the big five personality types are often helpful in matching individuals to organizational culture. And so this is, again, aligning your personality with your job. So if we look at international views, values are different between cultures, and the two frameworks for assessing culture is Hofstede and global. So Hofstede's framework for assessing culture, there are 5 factors: power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation. So that would be, so let's see. Okay, so this is from the book if you want a closer look at the countries and their rank in power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty, and long-term, so they can give a rank of the country for how important this is to their culture. So, let's just talk about this. The power distance describes the degree to which people in a country accept that power in institutions and organizations is distributed equally. So a higher rating on power distance means that the larger inequalities in power and wealth exist and are tolerated in the culture, such as in a class or caste system that discourages upward mobility. So that's sort of how, if you look at this index here and the ranking, how you can judge that. For individualism versus collectivism, individualism is the degree to which people prefer to act as individuals rather than members of a group and believe that individual rights come above all else. While collectivism is more of a tight social framework where people expect to work with others in groups. And you could think of, say, like a Japanese culture is more collectivism, or an American culture is more individualism. Masculinity versus femininity. So masculinity is the degree to which the culture favors traditional masculine roles, such as achievement, power, and control, as opposed to viewing men and women as equals. So there are some cultures where they're more masculine, male-centered, and some cultures are more female-centered. And this chart will denote that range as well. Uncertainty avoidance, the degree at which people in a country prefer structure over unstructured situations to define their uncertainty avoidance. So in cultures that have high on uncertainty avoidance, people have an increased level of anxiety about uncertainty and ambiguity, and use laws to control and reduce the uncertainty. Okay, long-term versus short-term orientation. It measures society's devotion to traditional values. People in a culture of long-term orientation look to the future and value thrift, persistent, and tradition. Short-term orientation, people are the here and now. They accept more readily, and they don't see a lot of impediments to change. So these are just sort of how we can kind of think about this. So again, it's interesting if you look at this and you think about if you've ever experienced different cultures, and you think even about our culture, and the distance that occurs between the power, unequal power and distribution between groups, how we feel about that. And even, a lot of times we talk about that 1% and the elite. So it's definitely built into an American culture. Individualism and collectivism in the American culture, and we're more individualism, although we do have collective elements, but we do prefer to act on our own rather than in groups. And I can see that in the classroom where when I bring up teamwork, students are like, oh no, not teamwork, please, I don't want teamwork, I'll switch this class if I have to. Now, collectivism is the idea that people operate within the social framework where they help others out and they expect help when they need it. So certain cultures are a little bit more about this collectivism. Certainly not the American culture, but you can see collectivism in certain families as well. And in masculinity, I think a lot of cultures are more focused on masculinity, which extends to which the culture prefers, achievement, power, control. So this is something to kind of think about. You can apply these not only to a national culture, but also a company culture. And that's why it's important for two levels on organizational behavior. So here's the culture. You can see this more clearly in the textbook on page 83 if you look at this. It's interesting to see if you want to look at the difference between cultures. If you look at Denmark, they're not so big on the power distance, but they're big on being more collectivism. And that's, I guess, expresses in their social state of a country. They're lower on masculinity, and they lower in avoidance, and they're sort of in the middle on long-term, short-term orientation. So, okay, global framework for assessing cultures. The global framework takes a look at 9 dimensions of national culture. It is similar to Hofstede's model, but adds the humane and performance orientations. The humane orientation looks at how much society rewards people for being altruistic and kind, whereas the performance orientation looks at how much the society encourages and rewards good work. So I think a lot of in American society, we're looking more towards performance and encouraging good work. But we have these similar factors that we've talked about before, but adding these 2 factors to this global framework. Okay, so as far as managers are concerned, consider job screening candidates for helping to understand their personalities and how they're going to fit into the workplace. It's not uncommon for companies to use a form of MBTI in training and development to help employees better understand themselves and team members and facilitate communication. And this is something that we kind of looked at this online. You're able to do online and evaluate your employees' jobs, their work, how they work in groups, and your organization determine optimal personality fit between putting groups of people together, putting people in certain tasks and jobs, and take into account employees' situational factors when evaluating their observable personality traits, and lower situations where they're not going to do well, and increase situation strength to better, put their personality characteristics to work. So if you have someone who is great with people, maybe you make them more of a customer service or receptionist. Someone who's really not good with people and very argumentative, maybe you find them a quiet job by themselves, somewhere in the back of the company. So you also want to take into considerations different cultures of people. So people's different cultures and backgrounds. So when you're dealing with a collective workforce made up of a lot of nationalities, you want to really think about how they fit into the corporation and how their backgrounds affect their personalities and their ability to work. Okay. So keep in mind that personality is the sum of as a manager, keep in mind, personality impacts the way individuals interact with each other. And it's fairly easy to measure to gain insight into the worker. So the big 5 personality traits are somewhat universal, but are very useful in predicting behavior. And values are important to understand as they influence how a customer works and behave. And they vary significantly across cultures. Keep that in mind. However, it's important to understand that culture is where you are. So sometimes if you're working in a foreign company and they have a foreign culture, you're going to have to adapt to that culture more than they're going to have to adapt to you. So keep in mind that all these personalities, a lot of research. It's a very interesting area of organizational behavior, and a lot of research is done here to get a better understanding of people's personalities and how to leverage them to make them more successful at work, better job satisfaction, more productive, and hopefully leading to a stronger organization. Okay, so in summary, we described personality in ways that it can be measured, factors that shape it. We talked about the MBTI as a personality test and something that you may want to look into. We talked about the Dark Triad of characteristics. We discussed how the concept of core self-evaluation and self-monitoring are very useful in understanding personality. We contrasted terminal and instrumental values. We described the difference between person job fit and person organizational fit, and we identified Hofstede's 5 value dimensions of a national culture. So there was a lot going on in this chapter. Very interesting chapter, and keep in mind that when you're working with this chapter, thinking about this chapter, you can apply it not only to work environments but also to your personal life as well. Thank you, and I'll see you soon for chapter 6.